What if I told you that before Bobby Orr floated across the ice and changed how we think about defensemen, the greatest player at that position was a man who spent his life fighting alcohol and a mind he could not trust? This is not Bobby Orr's story. It is the story of Doug Harvey, a kid from a working-class corner of Montreal who grew into the calmest brain on the blue line and the stormiest soul away from the rink. On the ice, he slowed games down, controlled the puck, and turned defense into an art form that coaches study today. Off the ice, teammates watched him drift between sharp humor and heavy silence, between discipline and self-destruction. An addict, mentally ill, yet for more than a decade, he was the standard every other defenseman was measured against. Before we begin, please subscribe and turn on notifications to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. He grew up in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, a crowded slice of Montreal where paychecks were small, tempers were short, and the corner tavern was part of everyday life. His father worked long hours, his mother kept the household together, and children learned early to read the moods of the adults around them. After school, he chased pucks and footballs through back alleys and outdoor rinks, soaking up every minute on the ice and on the field. In the locker rooms, beer was just another part of the air, passed around after games the way stories and jokes were. Nobody thought much about it, and neither did he. At West Hill High School, he became a star in Canadian football, a fierce defensive back who hit hard, and Reed plays even harder. That talent earned him recognition across Quebec and a spot in the Canadian Navy, where nights on the North Atlantic would push him closer to the bottle than anyone yet realized. When the war ended, he came back to Montreal with a steadier stride and a harder edge. On the ice, that meant focus. He joined the Montreal Royals in the Quebec Senior Hockey League, a tough circuit where men played for pride as much as for pay. There, his vision and calm with the puck stood out. While others fired it off the glass, he held it, waited, and threaded passes through narrow seams. With the Royals, he lifted the Allen Cup, the highest prize in Canadian amateur hockey, and it was clear he did not belong at that level. A brief stop with the Buffalo Bisons in the American Hockey League confirmed it. Coaches saw a defenseman who could control shifts, and in 1947, the call every Montreal kid dreamed of came. The Canadiens wanted him on their blue line. Stepping into the Montreal Canadiens dressing room was like walking into a museum that was still alive. Stanley Cups lined the history, veterans owned every corner, and a young defenseman had to earn every second of ice. At first, he was steady rather than spectacular, trusted to move the puck, clear the front of the net, and learn what it meant to wear that jersey in a city that treated hockey like a religion. Over time, coaches leaned on his calm presence. He played heavier minutes, killed penalties, and began to touch the puck in more important moments. Then came the spring of 1954, and the night that could have broken him. Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final against Detroit went into overtime. A harmless-looking shot floated in from the point. He reached out with his glove to knock it away, misjudged the bounce, and watched it deflect past his own goaltender. Season over. Cup gone. In Montreal, that kind of mistake can follow a man forever. He chose to let it fuel him instead. After that cruel bounce in 1954, something shifted. He did not just recover, he took over. While most defensemen of that era were told to move the puck quickly and get out of the way, he began doing the opposite. He would take a pass in his own zone, pull the puck in close, and wait. Skates, gliding, head up, he let the game slow down around him. Only when the ice opened did he send a clean, simple pass that cracked the forecheck apart. From the blue line, he ran the power play like a quarterback, walking the line, sliding laterally, changing angles until a shooting lane or a backdoor option appeared. He did not need crushing hits or wild rushes to dominate. His weapon was control. By the mid-1950s, coaches trusted him to start every important shift, to calm down chaos, to turn defense into offense with a few quiet touches. The awards followed. 7 times, he was named the best defenseman in the league. 6 times he lifted the Stanley Cup with Montreal, including a run of 5 in a row that defined a dynasty. Year after year, he landed on the first All-Star team, the standard every other blue liner was measured against. Before Bobby Orr ever arrived, he had already rewritten the job description for an NHL defenseman. For most of the 1950s, the crowd only saw the calm on the ice. Inside, something very different was building. Years of casual drinking in locker rooms and on Navy ships had quietly hardened into dependence. Road trips, late nights, and the pressure of carrying a dynasty gave him endless excuses to reach for another drink. Teammates knew he liked to stay out, but in that era, a player with a beer in his hand was almost a badge of toughness, not a warning sign. No one around him had the language for mental health. Decades later, doctors and biographers would say he likely lived with bipolar disorder, a condition that can swing a person between intense highs and heavy lows. The description fit what people remembered. There were days when he was sharp, funny, and magnetic, driving practices and games with total control. There were other days when he turned inward, sat in silence, or pushed people away and disappeared into the bottle. On the ice, he still read every play, a second ahead of everyone else. Away from it, the gap between the genius and the man was quietly widening, and nobody yet understood how dangerous that gap would become. For years, he had quietly watched owners and executives control every part of a player's life. Contracts were one-sided, pensions were murky, salaries were secrets. The men on the ice were the stars, but the men in suits pulled every string. He was not built to stay silent forever. Alongside players like Ted Lindsay, he started pushing for a real players' association, the first serious attempt to give NHL athletes basic leverage. They were not asking for luxury, just clarity and respect. In the conservative world of that era, it was seen as rebellion. Behind closed doors, owners reacted the way powerful people often do when challenged. Lindsay was shipped out of Detroit. In Montreal, the calm general on the blue line suddenly became a problem in the boardroom. It did not matter that he was still the best at his position. What mattered was that he was asking uncomfortable questions. The answer came in the summer of 1961. He was traded to the New York Rangers, exiled from his hometown team, while still near the peak of his powers. Publicly, it was just a hockey trade. Privately, many knew it looked a lot more like punishment. New York gave him a fresh jersey, but not a fresh start. On the ice, he was still brilliant enough to win another Norris trophy. Even as a veteran, away from the rink, the habits that had once been invisible were starting to leave marks. Nights out ran longer, mornings felt heavier. The line between celebration and escape blurred. In the early 1960s, he tried to build something beyond hockey, putting money and trust into a restaurant that carried his name. When a business partner disappeared and the books collapsed, he was left holding the debt. Years of savings vanished. For a man who had grown up counting every dollar, it was a crushing blow. At the same time, his relationship with teams grew more strained. He missed training camp while trying to sort out the financial mess, a decision management saw as disrespect rather than desperation. Once a cornerstone of a dynasty, he was now demoted, pushed toward minor leagues where the pay was low and the travel was hard. He could still see the ice better than almost anyone. What he could not see was a way out. With every setback, the bottle felt more familiar. The genius who had controlled the pace of games was watching his own life slip beyond his control. Even as the years and the miles piled up, the game was not quite finished with him. In the late 1960s, St. Louis called, looking for experience on the blue line. At an age when most players had long since hung up their skates, he pulled his on again and stepped into an NHL playoff run. He could not move as fast as before, but his head for the game was still sharp. He settled play, guided younger teammates, and showed that vision ages better than legs. When his playing days truly ended, he did not walk away from the sport. He coached, he scouted, he helped teams in new leagues find talent and stability. Away from the spotlight, he poured energy into summer hockey camps, teaching children how to skate, how to handle the puck, and how to see the ice the way he did. Some families who could not afford the fees found that meals, equipment, and room at camp quietly appeared anyway. For kids who would never know his full story, he was simply the older man who loved the game enough to share it. Recognition did not come cleanly. When his name first became eligible for the Hockey Hall of Fame, the call did not come. Only a year later was he finally selected, and even then, the moment was complicated. He chose not to attend the ceremony, heading out to fish instead, a quiet protest from a man who felt the league had spent too long looking the other way while he slipped through the cracks. Montreal took longer still. It was not until the mid-1980s that the Canadiens raised his number 2 to the rafters of the Forum. The crowd stood, the ovation rolled on, and for one night, it felt as if an old wound between a player and an organization had begun to heal. Away from the bright lights, his reality was far more modest. He worked at a racetrack near Ottawa and lived in a converted railway car on the grounds, a strange and telling home for someone who had once directed the flow of the entire sport from the blue line. Years of drinking had taken their toll. In late 1989, he died of cirrhosis of the liver, his body finally giving out after a lifetime of strain his mind had long carried. Ask older fans who saw him in his prime, and many will tell you the same thing. Before Bobby Orr came along, this was the defenseman who set the standard. Not the fastest, not the flashiest, but the one who seemed to hold the whole game in his hands from the blue line. Coaches copied his patience with the puck. Young players studied how he turned defense into the first pass of every attack. Modern puck-moving defensemen are still walking down a path he cleared decades ago. His life away from the rink was messy, painful, and often unfair. Yet his impact on hockey is clean and impossible to erase. He forced people to think about labor rights in the sport. He forced us, years later, to talk about mental health in a way his own generation never could. So what do we owe players like him, whose bodies and minds are spent building the game we love? In the end, he was never a simple hero. He was a man whose gifts on the ice lived beside real damage inside, someone who could read a game perfectly, but could not always read himself. An addict, mentally ill, yet still an NHL legend whose fingerprints are hidden in every calm breakout and every controlled power play you see today. When we talk about players like him, we are really talking about what we value in sport and in people: talent, courage, flaws, responsibility, and empathy too. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out more great hockey stories right here on the channel. Your support truly means a lot to us. Thank you for watching.